There are few things that we do in our daily lives that are not somehow connected to the law. Whatever your thoughts are about the law, on this program, we want the law to connect to you. Hi, my name's Teresa Quigley, and this show is The Law and You. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for tuning into The Law and You. Today we're talking about short sales, which is a topic that is high on everybody's radar. And with us is Robin Long of Fear & Long. She's an attorney who does short sales.
Good afternoon.
And Simon Harrison of Harrison Real Estate, who was quoted in the paper as having experience with short sales. And I've known Simon for some time, so I asked both Simon and Robin to be on the show. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Simon and Robin, for being here.
Okay.
I'm going to start by saying Simon just handed me some papers, which I don't understand. So it has to do with, let's back up, the whole short sale problem. No, perhaps we should go further back than that.
Distress sales are becoming a larger part of the market, and the root of it is that all of the mortgages that were sold over the last 10 years or so were bundled into bonds, and these are some of the bonds which show the delinquency rates, which are sometimes extraordinary, and sometimes.
So we just back up for processing. The mortgages, I took a mortgage, you took a mortgage, we all took mortgages, and those mortgages get packaged up into huge groups and get sold.
Mortgage-backed securities,
and then
collateralized debt obligations, CDOs.
Okay.
And these are just some of the figures from some of them. And if we take a look at a group of loans or a pool, there are, in this one, there's 157 mortgages, and the value is 17 million, and the delinquency total is 28, which is 17%.
I had the wrong one. Oh, that's yet another one, I say.
On this one, you know, it's 42 million and there's 23% delinquency. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the real estate market that we were dealing with sometimes was priced on what you could finance a property for rather than what it was
I
worth.
just want to back up. How does one define delinquent? 1 month late, 2 months late, 3 months late?
There's 30 days late, 60 days late, 90 days late, bankruptcy 30 days, bankruptcy 90 days, foreclosure 90 days, and...
So actually, when you look at this, so in other words, these are charts of various different types of grouped mortgages that are all showing delinquency rates. But the delinquency rates are pretty bad. They're anywhere from 15% to 40% delinquency. And
now, keep in mind, these are probably extreme examples, because these pools are for sale. So the higher the percentage of delinquency,
the lower the price.
The lower the price, right.
Okay. But I don't want to talk about the securities as much as what it's telling us about the real estate market. So, and what I see on this is most of the delinquencies are kind of new. So in other words, these people's failure to pay their mortgage, but
or inability,
inability to pay their mortgage is mostly a new recurrence. For instance, on this, 75% of the loans that are delinquent are all within the past month.
Well, no, 75% of the loans are performing. There's nothing wrong with them. So ideally, that should be worth 75% of the total value.
Yes, but again, the largest percentage group is only a few months old. So in other words, this is a very new phenomenon, all these people failing to pay their loans.
Yes, and this is a route which is making distressed properties more of a percentage of transactions that we're attempting to do. And some of them...
So wait, I'm sorry, let's back up. So basically what's happening is over the years people took out mortgages, suddenly they can't pay them, they're delinquent. Some of them, not everybody, but there's percentages that go up as high as 42%.
And that's all over the country. One of the challenges is these pools often, if there's 100 mortgages, they could be in 35 different states.
Okay.
They could be in a lot of different areas. They could be combined with low credit, good credit, bad credit. It could be
So it isn't
condos.
necessarily a statement about the East End of Long Island.
No.
It's a statement about a broadband spectrum of the United States.
What's happening in the real estate market across the country is, what I hear a lot sometimes is, People say, well, we're not going to be affected out here. We are being affected out here. Not to the extent as, say, in Southern California or Fort Myers.
Florida.
Oh, yeah, Florida.
But there are percentages which are disturbing nonetheless.
Okay, so basically what happens is all of a sudden you have, to get to talk about it from the perspective of real estate and non-mortgages, all that's telling us is there are people who are not paying their mortgages, which is causing them to have to sell. And it's causing the value of the property to be reduced because they have to sell, they're asking for less.
Well, for some people that are in this position, I think we have to just back up a little bit. When people took their mortgages out initially, when they bought their houses going back 3 to 5 years ago, which is what we're dealing with now, mortgages that are starting to adjust, mortgages that are coming off of being interest-only loans. So we're starting to get taxes going up. So we're starting to get a new impact.
Okay, so in other words, sorry, I just for the sake of people to let them process. In other words, when people take loans, a lot of those new loan packages were not 30-year fixed. They were 3-year adjustable, meaning for 3 years I have a low rate, and after that it adjusts.
Or for 5 years.
Or 5 years, or 7 years, or whatever.
Now, we also had another phenomenon, which is falling prices, but we did have another phenomenon, which was people using their homes as credit cards. So when we had this arbitrary escalation of the value of houses for this last 3 to 5 year period, a lot of people dipped into that equity, use their house as a credit card to be able to pull out that equity for either home repairs, pay their children's colleges, pay off credit cards, because credit card interest was not tax deductible, whereas mortgage interest was. So there was an encouragement to dip into the equity. Now, as you dip into the equity,
and enthusiasm.
Right. Now, as you dip into the equity, and the house amount of mortgage that you have is increased, as house prices are now starting to drop, that equity of the values.
Because there was a market for this product all over the world, in pension funds and mutual funds, because they were performing, and as soon as it sort of peaked or filled up, the market for these securities disappeared virtually overnight.
Well, my greatest fear is, I understand these numbers, is that behind these numbers are people. And there are people in our community who believed that the values of their houses would not drop, or believed what some mortgage brokers told them during their mortgage periods when they were taking these mortgages, that they would be able to refinance and get out of these high mortgages or these variable rate mortgages, or even worse, the negative amortization mortgages. And unfortunately, there is no refinance to help them. And as a result of these values of the houses dropping, they have now become upside down on their properties. Their mortgages are higher or greater than the value of the properties at this time.
Okay, let me just stop you there and ask a question, and from both of your perspectives. Simon, you deal with it from the sellers coming into your office looking to sell their house, and Robin, you're dealing it with the people when the deal is put together and they're in a situation where they're short selling, which is selling for less than their actual mortgage amount. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to talk about it from the perspective of the market. I forgot where I was going to go.
I had a woman that came in that wanted to sell her house.
Okay. Oh, that's what I was going to go. Go ahead.
She bought it a long time ago for $180,000, and she now has $350,000 on it, which is probably, she probably jumped on board. And the house is probably worth $625,000. So that's like a normal transaction.
Right.
And if she needs to sell, she could actually sell for $400,000.
Right. Because she doesn't have a mortgage that's going into...
She can satisfy the mortgage.
Right, exactly.
Now, in another example, on the same day, somebody came in and they wanted to sell a house for $899, and they owed $750,000 on it, and the house was worth as much as the first person. It was worth $625,000. So, I mean, these are not fun conversations, and not everybody is going to win in this scenario.
And there's a million questions, which is how did they get the $899 mortgage? How did they get, or the $750 mortgage, or whatever the number?
Those questions, those questions, I think, at this point, for a lot of people, are stopping them from coming forward to get the help they need, because they're embarrassed. They don't know how they got there. I mean, this is devastating to our communities on a lot of levels, because even the social aspects, parents in crisis make children in crisis. The ripple effects of this housing crisis is going to be felt in our schools. It's felt in our workplaces. What we have to do is get the people who are in trouble, who are starting to fall behind, or people who are not behind yet but have adjustable rate mortgages, or know they're going to fall behind, to come out and get the help to review their mortgages and see what options.
Right.
Because the options go from either a modification, which are not as productive as we see. I just heard recently a statistic that 60% of modifications that the banks have agreed to are failing. So banks are pulling back on modifications now. They want to see that you're capable of holding the house. Or is it coming to time to look for the short sale? Go out there, market your house, understanding that you're not going to make any money on this, that you're going to come out with zero at the end of the day.
But you
might
and
be
maybe
able
even
to,
less than zero if there's a deficiency judgment.
and
You know what
maybe
my
but
thing
able to
about
save
that
your
whole-
credit.
you not only do you save your credit, but you get yourself out from a payment that is
Correct.
burdening you. But get to the point I wanted to make before. In this community, which I lost my thread in the middle, I apologize about that. In this
Crashing around?
It was market crashing. It was very scary.
crashing. In this community, are we seeing the types of people that you had been describing, which are the homeowners who are losing their jobs, or are we seeing Wall Street people, for lack of a better term, who put their money into these houses out here thinking they were going to, continue to get their bonuses, which suddenly dried up?
I have to be honest, they're not Wall Street people. They're our neighbors. A lot of them
I'm not
thought that,
So your answer to your question
Wall
is
Street
it's
people's
more
neighbors,
than-
and it's affecting,
everyone.
across the board.
But we're seeing
every
it's
spectrum.
not, only one group or the other.
No,
Are
you're
you seeing
getting
it-
investors, people who bought a first or second house, thinking that they would be able to flip that. And you're also getting the long-term residents, our next-door neighbors, who went into, again, using the house as a credit card or refinanced, pulling out a load of equity, who no longer can make the payments. Have the payments been interest only?
Well,
or
Robin, you
such
actually
and
raised a
chopping?
good point, which is the whole psychology of it and people being
Yes.
embarrassed about it. Because, frankly, that's just a mindset that has to switch. Because, one, everybody's in the same boat,
As,
witnessed by these statistics,
Yeah, but it's- yeah.
But two, you have to look at it differently, which is it isn't the house of the 1950s, which people took their earnings and sunk it into a house and paid off their mortgage and it was theirs. We don't do it that way, or we haven't been doing it that way for 15 years, which is
hasn't
we
changed.
use it as a credit card. Do you know? It's
That's-
just you go in there and you take your mortgage and you live off the equity of your home. So in a certain sense, you're trading in your
It's
credit
like a
card.
reverse mortgage.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, there's two mindsets that might have to change.
Right.
We had a mindset that was coming out which said that the great American dream was attainable by everyone. Everyone should own a house. We had a government and lending programs that were for everybody to become a homeowner at any cost. So you had people without the wherewithal to do it, without the down payments. I mean, I remember when I bought my first house back in the just past the Stone Age, I had to have 20% to put down. Whether I borrowed that from mom and dad, but I had to have 20% down. We went through a period in the last 5 to 7 years where we had 106% funding. Glorified renters, people who did not have a stake in the homes that they owned, but we told them they had a right to have a house. So that was point one, and the other one is the credit card phenomena, that our houses became a place to pull money out of. That went against Leave It to Beaver, where you owned your house for your whole
Right,
life.
exactly. And those are the two mindsets.
And those two
But now-
mindsets must change.
So one, we have to change mindsets, but two, we have to deal with the very real reality of, so here you have a house and you have a mortgage you can't pay, either because it's just you've lost your job, or it's just the payments are too high, or your interest adjusted too much, but one way or the other, you have to sell your house. So what happens?
Now, I think it's probably safe to say that it's not happening to everybody out here. But if there are 20 homes on the street and it happens to two, and one person goes bankrupt, another one does a short sale or a distress sale, it does in fact bring down the value of the street. So even if you've done the right thing, like your grandfather taught you, and been conservative, you're being affected by this. And it does have the ability to have, a continuing downward spiral.
Downward spiral.
So
So we have to stop it.
We have
If,
to
stop
if,
it.
yeah, and that's what the stimulus package is talking about. I'm not a Mets fan or Yankees fan on that situation, but if a distress sale affects the value of the neighborhood, then it is a neighborhood issue. I don't know what the percentages are of people who are underwater, but the figures that we're hearing are that prices are coming down about 2% a month,
Do you think
which is
that there-
24% a year.
That's a lot.
And they say that's been a year and a half, so it's down about a third, which is about the same amount that most people's IRAs have gone down.
Yeah.
It's about the
So
same
another-
figures that have gone down. What gas has done, it was, you know.
And I think that the numbers for Suffolk County and for New York State are going to be a little misleading, because with the change of the mortgage laws, there was a delay in the filings of Liz pendants for about 90 days. So we had a 90-day period where the new mortgage laws kicked in and new notices had to be sent out. So Liz pendants haven't been filed. So the statistics for Suffolk County right now, I think, are going to be a bit skewed probably for the entire state because of the change statewide. Those numbers are going to be skewed. I would be very interested in seeing where those numbers are going to be in a month or two when, after the 90-day notices have gone out,
And,
the banks are going to
and-
start.
and I did hear a figure that it takes a minimum of 14 months to complete a foreclosure. So if there are some people at home that are behind a month or two and that are biting their nails, just know that nothing's going to happen really fast.
Reach out
It
for
takes
help.
time.
Yeah, and there's time to potentially offer your house for sale. Whether a short sale is the only option that's available, I mean, that's a small percentage. But if it gets bigger, there is still time and there are still options. So.
Now, I recognize that the psychology of having your house deflated in value is a little upsetting. And
Unless you have a really huge mortgage on it, then
Well,
you've
no, no.
effectively sold it already.
Yeah, and I was going to add, and then there are the people who mortgaged at 90% or 95% and therefore are in a really bad spot because they're,
And I'm sorry, these were also based on windshield appraisals?
well, this is actually exactly where I'm going, is what, in the real world, Simon, since you're, the person who's the real estate broker and deals with properties, what are the values of the houses?
Where's the bottom? Where's the floor?
Well, are the prices that they're at now, are they really undervalued? Or were they overvalued before? I don't mean to put you in a bad spot, but,
I can certainly offer a few thoughts on that. There was a survey done, and it certainly wasn't scientific, but about 40% of the people who were looking at buying real estate said they were just not going to buy anything now.
What was that, right now, or is that a few
It was
months
very
ago?
recent.
Very recent.
Very
okay.
recent. To point at where the floor in the market might be, which is the real estate market's too big to fail. The floor in the market is often determined up to a year later. So, like they called the recession that started last December.
Oh, they just
called
called
that
it.
in November.
Yeah, that's right.
But they said no recession, no recession. I
And
mean,
then they
throughout the
finally
spring,
said it's a recession, right.
throughout the summer, and it's the same thing with the real estate market. I mean, we're starting to see signs of a bottom, and as far as valuing a piece of property, there are three ways to do it, whether it's a house or a piece of property.
Well, I before the show started, I was telling you that certainly the activity in my office for real estate has definitely picked up. But because I'm not on the end of knowing what they're listed at, I have no idea whether the prices are, what the properties are worth, whether they're distressed. I mean, if they're distressed.
They have
as
to be
in-
listed.
Well,
Yeah, but-
regardless of how much is owed on it, it does have a value. And there's a way to determine value.
Right.
And there are three typical ways. One is comparable sales, which is what banks generally rely on.
Right.
The other one is the
That's a
replacement.
difficult one given what's
Today.
happening today.
Right, and I do work for banks. I'm not a licensed appraiser, but I do work for banks. I do what's called BPOs, which are often a precursor to a short sale scenario, and also a way for banks to determine what the values of these bonds are. Another way is a replacement value. What the piece of land might be worth, what they would cost to build a house.
That, I think, is probably a pretty legitimate number, no?
Good, but this is
Still not okay?
this is a disturbing market. So you need to look at all three methods. The third method is the income approach. What could you rent it for?
Ah,
And it used to be
But how
that
do you
you could
determine
rent it
rental
for a little less than a mortgage amount would be
Okay,
if you put 20% down.
okay.
But those numbers, you know, they're doing this and they have to find a new bottom. And there are enough signs that there are enough buyers out there that we could, in fact, put in a bottom here or close to here if financing was available.
Oh, that brings up a whole different question, which is, yikes, although
Let's make it an hour.
Exactly. Well, which is, although I did today see that there's a new $1 trillion plan for the banking crisis.
This is a good time for first-time home buyers. This could be a good time for first-time home buyers who have excellent credit, and they're talking about giving some tax deductions. So for the new people coming into the market, and mortgage rates are still very low, new people coming into the market, this could be a very exciting time for those people. Going back to the people who were trying to help, this is their options are a little more limited, and you're looking at until the gavel hits on a foreclosure, and we don't want to go that route. We are looking at possible modifications or short sales and starting and repairing of credit. But I think that the most important thing is taking an action.
Now,
Because we
Robin,
cannot
you
stop
do the
without
actual
it.
short sale part,
Yes.
which, just, you know, briefly, I'll start and you can jump in when you feel it's appropriate. The bank, you know, I'm the bank, I'm owed $1 million on a house or $500,000, and the house is selling for $400,000. I come to you and I say, help, 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 and what do you do?
What we try to do is twofold. We first have to put together what is called a grievance package or a hardship package. So we will ask the seller to get together for us all the essential letter of how he got into this position. He lost his job, a divorce, a sickness in the family, what has caused this.
It's like an allocution.
You have to get the
Difficult for some to.
taxes together, we have to get pay stubs together. And then what we're doing is we're going to the bank and we're saying to the bank, look, the value of the property, we have to go into, by the way, into contracts, and we have to rely on our real estate brokers to get us a fair price in accordance with what the values of the
Market
property
data,
are.
which is challenging
Which is
at times.
challenging because there might not even be a sale in
But
the last 6 months.
even more challenging for the banks.
Yes.
Who are often just looking at a screen.
Correct.
You know.
And then we sit on the phone, and we put this package in with the contracts, and then it's a matter of sitting with the banks and negotiating.
And what you're trying to do is negotiate that $500,000 loan down to $400,000.
What you're doing is even worse than that, because not only are you saying to them, you're going to take less on your mortgage, we're going to also take from that contract price, which is less than your mortgage, we're going to pay the realtors, we're going to pay your attorney, we're going to pay New York State their transfer tax, we're going to pay title fees or any judgments.
In other words, what you're looking to do is to get that homeowner out with no debt.
The homeowner at the end of the day must have a zero, cannot walk out with any money. However,
Can't
all
sell
of
the
his,
furniture or anything
nothing,
tricky.
Nothing, but every penny must go to pay anything that's potentially a lien on the property, which means if taxes are owed, the bank is going to lose that money from whatever you've offered them. So it's very important that we get a good value to the property. On behalf of the seller, it's a wonderful thing to do because it's better than having a bankruptcy or a foreclosure. So they must understand that even though you're coming out zero, you're coming out way ahead for your
But
credit.
I've actually...
And I do want to say that a lot of the listings that I have with buzzwords like foreclosure and bankruptcy and short sale and auction, I mean, these are distressed sales, and a lot of people are like, okay, that must mean it's a good deal. And in the past, it often indicates that the bank just wants to get rid of it. But very often, the bank wants to get every last dollar. And the bank has the ability to hold it and has the ability to see whether it makes sense to like walk it through the year and a half of foreclosure or whatever. Those distressed sales, those buzzwords that are all, you know, part of the new vernacular, they're a larger part of my business. I'm a buyer's broker in a lot of these scenarios. So we can present net deals to the bank, but they don't always represent a value. Of those two people that came in, wanted to list their house, the one that bought it some time ago that owed half of what it was worth, you know, in today's market,
Right.
is often a more interesting shot at a value, as opposed to trying to chew on tinfoil through a short sale, foreclosure, or any of that stuff over 3 months, 4 months. And if you attempt a short sale and other opportunities come up, I mean, you're jammed up for 5 months because you really need to present a contract.
When you do, I was just going to say, when you do a short sale, do you need a signed contract?
You have to have a signed contract, but that's a matter of negotiation. For example, when I do representing a purchaser on a short sale, I will negotiate into the contract that after, let's say, a 3-month period or a 4-month period, if my client wants to back out,
They can back out.
he can back out.
Right.
So that we are now looking at a period of, for contract law, of a new mortgage contingent, of a new contingency. We were very used to where you had buyers having a mortgage contingency where they needed bank approval
Now
to
you
buy
have
the house.
sellers having a-
Now
Reverse
we're having a
contingency.
seller's contingency where the bank has to give us permission to sell. And
In other
just
words,
to-
the seller doesn't want, the buyer or the seller doesn't want to be locked in for a year.
Correct,
With
and
this
so that
process. If
as-
it's, so there has to be an ability to get out.
Exactly.
Mortgage
So in an admi-
contingency is usually 45 days. The short
Right.
sale contingency is sometimes longer because
3 months.
the bank has to find out, first of all, who owns the mortgage,
So they've got to
which
do
is
their title
sometimes
search.
very
Yeah.
difficult to do. In fact, I think there was a
Oh,
senator.
because of the MERS law.
Well, there was,
MERS,
there was a senator in the Midwest that said, if you're being foreclosed, don't move.
Yeah. I heard
Because
that.
they have to prove that they own the mortgage.
Well, there's
Sounded like-
there's
Making it
another.
worse.
there-
I have to tell you, it sounded a little like vigilantism to me, because it's sort of like, forget all the laws, just take it into your own hands.
Well, we have,
I mean-
you do have another wrinkle to this too, because on top of Bank One, you might also have Bank Two,
Yes.
who gave
Or
you the
Bank
ex-
3.
or Bank
or
Three,
Mechanics
or a
Lien.
private law,
Or New
who-
York State Department of
well,
State Taxation Department.
Well,
too.
those people
IRS,
they won't negotiate.
Writ of replevin, is that the
Oh,
term?
don't throw
Don't-
those
don't
legal
throw
terms at us. We're just lawyers.
And real
Well,
estate lawyers.
that's when you make the deal, and then you find out that the seller or the seller's spouse owes $80,000,
exactly.
and then they have to come out first, and you have to start.
Well,
from
I think
day
you
one.
just brought up a very important point, is that with this new phenomena of modifications and short sales, I do recommend to my clients, make sure that you get an attorney who's familiar with them, because unless you've done your title search, even as a seller, to see what these judgments are, you could get the bank agreeing to a price, get to the closing table, and you can't close because there was 5 judgments the seller's attorney failed to find.
And
or
that
come up with
And
details.
a real estate broker, I mean, it's a big part of the mix to have somebody who knows what they're doing.
Absolutely. I am going to have to cut you both off because that's that music telling us we're finished. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, the audience, for tuning in to The Law and You. And thanks to our sponsors, Farrell Fritz and Bridge Abstract. Have a nice evening. Let's hope it's evening. That was very funny.
Cool beans.
Between, that was good.
Was that good?
Between,